There's no shortage of terrible ways to die. Drowning, for example, is a common fear. The thought of taking that final, desperate breath, only to have water fill your lungs. Many other terrible ways to die come to mind, but there's one in particular that has captured my attention for some time, and, for quite a few decades, had a fatality rate of around 75%. The Midwest United States, a grand expanse of sweeping plains, rich farmland, and friendly people. Over 127 million acres of land are used for agriculture, with over 760 million pounds of just corn being produced. Yet, it is in this serene landscape an unexpected danger lurks. This is a grain silo, a large structure used to store grain before it's shipped away from the farm. Spend any time driving along the long, flat highways, and you're bound to see quite a few of them. It is in these innocuous buildings where the danger resides. Grain is often removed from the bottom of the silo, commonly through a process called gravity discharge. It may sound complex, but it's not. The silo is designed with a funnel-like bottom, allowing the grain to flow out once the stopper is removed. Another common method involves using an auger, a screw-like mechanism that rotates to move grain onto a conveyor belt. This all seems harmless enough, but the danger doesn't lie at the bottom. It's at the surface. To ensure an even flow of grain, it used to be common practice to walk down the grain. This is as straightforward as it sounds. A farmhand would stand on the surface of the grain, walking around it to keep it flowing steadily. They may also dislodge any clumps of grain stuck to the sides of the silo. The issue lies with the grain itself. When it flows, it behaves similarly to quicksand. The suction created at the bottom, either by gravity or an auger, causes a funneling effect. The grain in the center of the silo is pulled down more quickly than the grains on the sides. One wrong step, and you're pulled into the suction. This is the most common way a grain engulfment happens. Other times, a hard crust forms on top of the grain, and empty spaces can form underneath as the grain settles over time. This is known as a grain bridge. If someone steps on this bridge, it can collapse, sending the victim into the chasm below, where rushing grain fills the void and traps them. Once entrapment begins, it can progress alarmingly fast. Moving grain cannot support the weight of a human. Research from Germany has found that if you're trapped up to your knees, you can't escape on your own. Up to your waist, you need assistance. At chest height, a formal rescue effort is required. Any higher and, well, you're in serious trouble. Grain is incredibly dense and heavy. A cubic foot of grain can weigh anywhere from 45 to 55 pounds. With an average silo capable of holding 10,000 to 50,000 cubic feet of grain, the pressure is immense. If a victim is completely engulfed, the pressure makes breathing extremely difficult. Each exhalation creates empty space around the body that is quickly filled with grain, restricting the next breath even more. The pressure has been compared to being trapped in cement or quicksand. Survivors describe it as being unable to even wiggle their toes inside their boots. The compression restricts blood circulation, reduces oxygen flow, and causes toxins to build up in the body. While suffocation is often not caused by the pressure, it can result in a victim's inability to protect their airways, essentially drowning in a sea of grain. Fortunately, stored grain has a porosity rate of 40 to 60%, meaning a victim might find an air pocket to breathe safely until rescued. Blunt force injuries are also common. The human body isn't designed to withstand such pressure, and with rescue efforts sometimes taking hours, the body can give way in what's known as a crush fracture. These fractures tend to occur in the lower limbs, but people have been rescued with broken ribs and fractured jaws. Soft tissue and nerve damage are also common, with muscle fibers tearing and nerves compressing under the weight of the grain. Once someone is engulfed, every minute counts. Suffocation can occur in under 3 minutes, so rescuers must act quickly. First, the flow of the grain has to be stopped. If not, there's a risk that the rescue team could be pulled down as well. Even if the victim's head is above the grain, professional rescue teams are called in due to the extreme pressure involved. Simply trying to pull someone out can result in broken bones and torn muscles. Grain rescue is rather complicated due to multiple factors. The air inside a silo can be just as deadly as the grain itself. Spoiling grain releases carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and other toxic gases. If the concentration is high enough, both the victim and rescuers can suffer asphyxiation. It's recommended that as soon as engulfment occurs, an aerating fan is turned on to clean out any toxic gas buildup. Grain is typically stored in a chilled environment to prevent spoilage. A fan blows dry air over the surface, and this, combined with moisture in the grain, can bring the core temperature down to between 30 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. If a victim is fully engulfed, they risk hypothermia, since they can't move to warm themselves against the cold grain. On the other extreme, decaying grain can release heat. If it's hot outside, the silo's interior can reach blazing temperatures. The most immediate and complicated factor is pressure. A trapped victim simply can't be pulled out. The friction from millions of grains is immense, with 400 pounds of force needed to lift someone who's buried up to their waist, and 900 pounds to remove someone fully engulfed. That is just enough force to shatter the femur, the strongest bone in the human body. Pulling someone out with a rope could cause permanent damage to the spinal column, or even separate the victim's shoulders. Finding the victim is a challenge itself. Rescuers must locate a fully engulfed victim quickly. Eyewitness accounts are vital, as they allow rescuers to start at the victim's last known location. If there are no eyewitnesses, the process is much slower. If the grain flow pattern is known, rescuers can estimate where a victim might be trapped. Rescue workers start with rescue probes, long, slender rods gently inserted into the grain. They feel for resistance or changes in grain density that might indicate a trapped human. Some rescue probes are equipped with temperature sensors or cameras, expediting the search. Rescuers move in a grid formation, starting from the last known location, or the center of the grain flow. Once the victim is located, the real work can begin. Rescuers use rescue tubes made of curved, interlocking panels, typically aluminum. This makes them lightweight, yet strong enough to hold back the grain. These panels are inserted between the victim and the surrounding grain with constant but gentle pressure to prevent further grain movement or injury. One by one, the panels are driven deep enough to reach under the victim's feet. Once in place, the tube stabilizes the grain, preventing more from piling in as rescues remove it. Grain is usually removed manually, using buckets and shovels, though a grain vacuum might be used in severe cases. This is a slow process, as rescuers must ensure they don't injure the victim while removing the grain. Once the head is exposed, communication becomes possible, speeding up the extraction effort. Medical personnel stands by, ready with oxygen, IVs, and monitoring devices for the rescue victim. Many victims develop large, painful contusions from the grain pressure. It's not uncommon to lose consciousness due to the sudden drop in blood pressure once the external pressure is relieved. In one instance, a worker in Manitoba, Canada, fell into a several-day-long coma after he was rescued due to toxic buildup in his bloodstream. Survivors face broken bones, blood pressure issues, muscle and nerve damage, hypothermia, and, of course, psychological trauma. From 1964 to 2019, the Agricultural Health and Safety Program at Purdue University recorded 1,225 entrapments. Over half occurred in corn, with others in soybeans, oats, wheat, flax, and canola. Corn accounts for the majority, making the Corn Belt states the most affected. Of all entrapments, over 70% occur on small, family-owned farms, exempt from OSHA grain handling regulations. At least 663 people have died, with victims ranging from 15 to 69 years old, and the highest death rates among the 16 to 19 and 50 to 69 age group. From 1964 to 2008, 78% of entrapments ended in death. Thankfully, since 2009, that number has dropped to 46%, and by 2012, fell further to 42%. Purdue attributes this decline to increased safety measures, better training for first responders, and an overall public awareness of grain engulfment danger. In 2010, a grain entrapment in Illinois took the lives of 2 workers, aged 14 and 19, with a third surviving the injuries. A year later, 2 boys in Oklahoma lost their legs to an auger. OSHA proposed new child labor regulations in agriculture, the most extensive in half a century, targeting farms with fewer than 10 employees and children working on family farms. Oddly enough, these regulations met significant opposition. Many argued that OSHA had overstepped, preventing children from learning essential skills early on. Even some of the families of victims who had died in engulfments claimed that the regulations went too far. Senators from rural states argued that the regulations could prevent children from even doing chores on their family farms. After considerable pushback, the regulations were withdrawn in 2012. Instead, the Labor Department opted for increased awareness, safety training, and heavier fines. While the average person may never face such a situation, the thought of slowly suffocating, crushed by freezing cold grain, alone, is terrifying. Even more chilling is how something as innocuous as a silo of corn can become a grave. Thank you for watching.